Hi, Frank. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, good.
We're just going to be starting in a second here, so just bear with us for a few minutes.
Okay, we're good to go.
Okay, good evening, council. Good evening, staff. Good evening, members of the public. Welcome to our March 1st council meeting. I have a motion moved by Lyle Wharton, second by Stephanie Jaworski. Be resolved that the March 1st, 2021 council meeting of the Township of South Glengarry now be opened at 7:01 p.m. All in favor of the motion? Motion's carried. I can ask everyone to please stand for the playing of our national anthem.
Sorry, bear with me for a second here.
Okay, thank you.
I apologize for the lack of sound at the beginning there. Getting the hang of this Zoom thing.
Yeah, that's okay. I have a motion moved by Sam McDonnell, second by Martin Lang. Be resolved that the Council of the Township of South Glengarry approve the agenda. Is there any additions to the agenda, Madam Clerk?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. We have the addition of a resolution under other business as item 7B2. And that will be a resolution that is being brought forward regarding the rollout of the Ontario vaccines for COVID-19.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other additions from members of council? Not seeing none, so the motion would be as amended. All in favor of the motion? Motion's carried. Is there any declaration of pecuniary interest or the nature thereof? I have one. It's in regards to disposition of land in the closed session portion. It's a property that is listed with a real estate company that I'm part owner of. So I'll declare a conflict of interest in closed session. And I'll ask Deputy Mayor Wharton to take that position during the closed session at that time. Okay, thank you. And approval of the minutes of February 16th. I have a motion moved by Stephanie Jaworski, second by Lyle Wharton. Be resolved that the minutes of the regular meeting of the Council of the Township of South Glengarry held on February 16th, 2021, including the closed session minutes, be adopted as circulated. All in favor of the motion? Motion's carried. Okay, we'll move to presentations and delegations. The first one tonight is the Boys and Girls Club. I'll ask our Chief Robertson to introduce who we have on here with us this evening, if you would, Chief.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council and members of the public. It's my pleasure this evening to introduce Jackie Richards. Jackie Richards is the Executive Director with the Boys and Girls Club of Cornwall SD&G. And Jackie is going to introduce the offerings that the Boys and Girls Club could offer to the residents of South Glengarry. So over to you, Jackie.
Thank you.
Hi.
Welcome, Jackie.
Thank you for having me. I'm like Kelly, I'm still learning the swing of this. So I've got a PowerPoint and hopefully you can be able to see it. So basically to kind of kick us off, I'll kind of do a quick overview. And if you have any questions at the end, do you see it all right now?
Yes, we do.
Perfect. Awesome. So at Boys and Girls Club, we truly believe that great futures start here. We sort of have three kind of strategic pillars, we call them. So strong kids, strong club, and strong voice. Basically under strong kids to positively impact the lives of children, and under strong club to achieve operational excellence, and strong voice is to use our strength and our credibility and passion to benefit our community's young people. This is kind of a snapshot. People often ask us, what do you do at the Boys and Girls Club, or what does a Boys and Girls Club look like? And that's a pretty kind of big picture view. We always say at Boys and Girls Club, if you've been to a Boys and Girls Club, then simply you've been to a Boys and Girls Club. Each Boys and Girls Club tends to have a bit of a unique look to be able to respond to the needs of their own individual communities. Most of these programs at some point, we have ran them currently or in the past. Our mission and our vision, really our vision is to provide a safe, supportive place where children and youth can experience new opportunities, overcome barriers, and build positive relationships. That is my dog behind me that is having fun, so my apologies. Our core values are belonging, respect, encouragement, working together, and speaking out. About Boys and Girls Club. Boys and Girls Club, we're a member organization of the Boys and Girls Club of Canada. And with that comes lots of access to resources, training, and also at times dollars. We also are recognized by the Ministry of Ed as an authorized recreation provider, which is has some similarities to licensed childcare. As we've mentioned, Boys and Girls Club, we believe is a safe and a supervised place where children and youth from all backgrounds can come together and participate in a wide range of programs with the purpose to enhance growth and personal development and potential. At Boys and Girls Club, we believe and we recognize that every child has the ability, the potential, and skills to pursue their dreams. Our staff, I think this is what gives us a bit of an edge, is that most of our staff work for us all year round, versus maybe an 8-week window for summer camp. And because of that, we're able to attract and retain staff, but also be able to provide them some good training opportunities along the way. Here's an outline of some of the training that we're able to provide to our staff summer camp team. And I think really the last one is of kind of new interest is the training in the new COVID requirements and protocols. Summer camp for us, we call Camp BGC. And last year, there's the locations where we delivered summer camp. I want to say last year, I believe, I mean, it being a bit of a strange times, I believe we may have been one of, or if not the only summer camp provider within SDNG. As you can see to your neighbor, that we did deliver a summer program in partnership with the Township of North Glengarry. Here's a kind of an overview of summer camp, what a registration or a flyer would look like. We offer summer camp from ages typically 6 to 12, but in Alexandria, we did 4 to 12. And I think we do weekly parents or families register per week. And something that we have is an online registration platform called RecDus, where families can go in, select their weeks, track their payments, generate receipts, and as well as onboard or upload additional documentation like med disbursement forms, really any kind of allergy list, things of those natures. And it's administratively, it's clean and is, for us anyways, easier to track. And kind of to end the presentation, that kind of gives you an overview of what Boys and Girls Club has looked like in the last year. I think to kind of bring note that we had a great opportunity last year to partner with the Jays Care Foundation, which was able to bring some dollars, but really probably most importantly was some training to our summer camp team last year. We delivered summer camps, as I mentioned in the earlier slide, at several locations, but we also delivered summer camp virtually last year for the first time, which the Jays Care partnership definitely provided some solid training and how to kind of do that or navigate kind of the virtual world and program delivery. And as I want to point out as well, being an authorized recognized authorized recreation provider, we also are able to tap into families who qualify for subsidy, are able to do that in our summer camp programs as well, which is nice for families who need that. So kind of lastly, that's kind of us kind of in a big picture. And if you have any questions for me, I will try my best to answer them.
Okay, thank you, Jackie. Can you take your slides down just so I can see all members of council?
Absolutely.
Perfect, thank you. So I will open it up to Dave. I don't know if you wanted to add anything at this point, or Mr. Chief, I should say today.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, that was an overview. We're looking at different options to provide to our residents, specifically on summer camps. And this is one of those options that we feel brings a lot of the tools that we're looking for to provide and a lot of the strengths as far as programming and staffing. So yeah, if there's any questions, tonight was a presentation just to introduce council and the public onto it towards this offering. And we'll be evaluating as we move forward exactly how we'll our summer programming, but feel free to ask any questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chief. Is there any questions? Deputy Mayor Wharton and Councillor Jaworski.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Jackie, thank you very much for your presentation. I've heard a lot of good things about the Boys and Girls Club, specifically in Cornwall. And it was brought to my attention last week that it was offered in North Glengarry. Like, I guess the question I have is, how does the fee structure work? I don't know if we're there yet or what, but I think what you're offering is a wonderful program. And I would just be curious to know how that works in comparison to us doing it ourselves. I don't know if that's a question for you, but that's what I have at this time.
I can probably jump in, and maybe Dave wants to add to that. We looked at your fee structure from two years ago. For the most part, there is a camp. You need to stay within sort of the competitive sort of summer camp fee structure. You can't outprice your community or your market. And so we looked at, I think, what the price was 2 years ago, and it was very close or in line with the pricing that is in North Glengarry as well as in Cornwall. So it was within that range.
Okay, thank you. I'll move to Councillor Jaworski, please.
Thank you. Thank you through you, Mr. Mayor. Hi, Jackie. Thank you very much for your presentation. I should mention, so I have 3 kids, 7, 9, and just turned 11. And so my kids have participated in the program here as we ran it in South Glengarry, and they also attended a couple of weeks up at North Glengarry as well. So I have some experience with the Boys and Girls Club running the camp. So some questions that came to mind that are also ones that parents such as myself have asked about these kind of programs. It's something that's very important for a lot of us is flexibility. And so it was very helpful for me that you could take down to age 4 in North Glengarry, but also in terms of flexibility, in terms of hours. There's a lot of parents that have a hard time fitting into sort of the regular workday hours of that 8:30 to 4:30 to drop off kids and pick them up. So I wondered if you had any flexibility with regards to those hours of operation, and also in terms of, you know, do you do family pricing as well? Or have you, when you were doing it with the other municipalities, was there subsidies that the municipality was providing to you know, your cost, or if it was entirely borne by yourself?
I'll speak first, Stephanie, to the hours. Historically, sort of in most kind of camp structures, you have sort of 8 to 5:30. It's kind of a typical sort of structure for camp. Last year, that changed things up with COVID and some of the regulations and the cost of camp. So last year in North Glengarry, it was shortened slightly to be able to kind of, really, to be honest, to be able to deliver. And in terms of the support in sort of any subsidy that was received from the township, the subsidy received for them would be the use of space. There was no cost for us to use the spaces in there, but not actually to subsidize, you know, kind of dollars into the program. It was really the space, and the cleaning of the space was the township contribution, which was huge for us. Moving forward for this year in summer camp, I mean, we're still waiting for guidelines that'll come out from last year. They came from the Ministry of Health. And I mean, this is a new year, but we do imagine that there still will be some sort of guidance regarding COVID and in terms of cohort sizing and staffing and things of those natures that can impact potentially the cost or the length of the day.
Okay. Oh, no, then that makes sense. With those other constraints, it's a little, you can't run things as per normal. If I could, Mr. Mayor, I have one subsequent. When you referred to the subsidies in terms of helping families being able to access subsidies to cover costs of summer camp, could you elaborate on that a bit more, please?
For sure. So our child care division has families who qualify for subsidy for their after school programs or before school programs. Typically, most recreation summer camps aren't able to access, or their participants can't be able to connect with those subsidy dollars. They're typically kind of allocated for licensed childcare programs only, daycare. Being an authorized rec provider, and when I authorized rec providers, I believe right now in Ontario are Boys and Girls Club and the YMCA. Those are the two that have been recognized by the province, to my knowledge. So being with that authorized rec title or classification, our programs are able to qualify. Families who are part of our summer camps are able to make an application for subsidy.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Jaworski. Is there any other questions from members of council or comments? Not seeing none. Thank you, Jackie, for your presentation, and Chief Robertson. We look forward for more information, I presume, coming in the near future or over the next few months back to council. And we look forward, and hopefully we could join up with the Boys and Girls Club for our residents in South Glengarry. So thanks very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, next presentation is the Geo Registry. We have Mrs. Irene Cameron with us this evening. Irene.
Thank you very much for having me today, and I'm very pleased to present to you. I'll just share my screen now. There. I'm getting a warning that my internet isn't that great, so hopefully you can all see it.
Yes, we can.
Perfect, perfect. Well, some of you are aware of the work that I've been doing with blockchain technology, and others, this will be the first time that you hear of it. But for the last, well, probably over 3 years now, I've been working on a project that's called Geo Registry Integrated Data Chain, or GRID for short. And it's meant to change how we register properties. And blockchain is something that most people are familiar with when they think of cryptocurrency like Bitcoin and Ethereum, but it's actually so much more. It's a it's what they refer to as a decentralized ledger, a distributed ledger, and it's on the basis of that that GRID is founded. And so with that, I'll just I know I'm limited in time, so I'm going to do my presentation very quickly, but hopefully I'll hit the highlights.
Real estate is a valuable asset, but the owners aren't the only stakeholders. They may have taken out a mortgage from a secured lender. Their property insurance company will certainly have an interest. Then there's the municipality who governs over the property and ensures the owner follows the rules, pays their taxes, and builds to code. And let's not forget about the easement holders and any number of other parties with a financial stake in the property. Over time, these stakeholders may not be aware of important changes which occur that can have an impact on value, title, and liens. Things like insurance claims, renovations, tax arrears, building permits, and other actions that could affect the interest of existing stakeholders or impact the value of the property for a potential buyer. There is no trusted way for stakeholders to effectively monitor a property for changes as they occur. The left hand doesn't necessarily know what the right hand is doing. And for potential buyers of a property, they rely on third-party information that may be inaccurate and on records that may be incomplete or scattered among segregated parties that don't communicate with each other. But what if all stakeholders could be on the same page and those records could be found in one place? GRID is the Geo Registry integrated data chain that incorporates all this information into one registry. GRID uses blockchain technology and smart contracts to authorize, record, monitor, and report changes as they occur so that all stakeholders know what's going on. Every action is authorized by the impacted stakeholders according to strict rules and then recorded by registering a new block on the blockchain. Supporting documents like building permits, building plans, mortgages, policies, claim forms, and agreements of purchase and sale are permanently stored in a virtual filing cabinet. Each stakeholder then receives an update of the registered change, and now all stakeholders' records align. Everyone is on the same page, and if the change requires another stakeholder to follow up with the owner, they will do so immediately. Everyone works in unison. Dynamic, real-time information that records the evolution of every property asset and notifies stakeholders as changes occur. It's the Property DNA Registry with supporting documentation. GRID, an intelligent solution for registering, monitoring, and record keeping for all property stakeholders.
So I'm not going to, as I say, I'm going to go very quickly through the presentation just to respect your time. But when first considering this, going into this venture, we were looking at what the weaknesses are within our system. So real estate is a significant contributor to our economy. And with, in Ontario alone, almost 5.4 million properties valued at nearly $3 trillion, that's a very significant amount. And for most of us, our homes, our properties are the largest assets that we have, our biggest investment. So it's very important that we safeguard it. So couple that with the inefficiencies that I know that municipalities have just because of the red tape and the systems that we have, along with the underground economy and lost tax revenues. And for yourselves, also lost permit revenues and a whole host of other things that you have. We've now identified that every stakeholder, which, you know, in our case is the owner, the municipality, lenders, insurers, CMHC, everybody has their own records and they're all separate. And so what GRID does is it, because of blockchain, we now have the ability to share information. Now it's not sharing all of the information, but it's sharing the information that you are that you are permitted and should have access to. So there's access controls and privacy laws are respected. So right now, we've just identified some of the big issues, but for municipalities, it's the unpermitted construction work. It's the inefficiencies within the system, or you having to do things that if we had a better system, your admin staff wouldn't be required to be looking up and sourcing. Owners would be able to access it themselves. And then the enforcement challenges that come in terms of if there is an outstanding work order you know, you don't necessarily have the manpower nor the ability to get property owners to act on those work orders until there's a sale and something has to happen. So GRID is patent pending. We filed an international patent application, and we're now considered patent pending. It's a disruptive technology, and it'll change how real estate is registered and monitored. We are unique. We are the first to market. We have developed a proof of concept, and we offer tremendous value. There are many other countries that are now moving towards converting their systems over to a blockchain-based land registry, and there's other countries like India that do not have a computerized registry system and still rely on paper that are also turning to blockchain-based systems. So we hope that Canada will be the next to do it and that Canada will become the leader in this. So what GRID does is it brings all the stakeholders together, and the system, it systemizes the processes that already exist within everybody's roles. And so we've tried not to add any extra work, just to work with it. And then it encodes all the contractual obligations and the regulations of each jurisdiction into the logic. And thereby it improves the efficiencies, it reduces the financial risks, and it reduces the red tape because of the shared knowledge and data. So this is just going through what it does. An interesting thing about GRID is that we have what's called a virtual filing cabinet, that after the smart contracts are executed, and that just means that the stakeholders agree, or let's say the municipality and the owner agree that the permit is going to be, a building permit is going to be taken out, well, then a copy of that building permit and a copy of the plans would be put into the virtual filing cabinet and stored. The owner would have access to it, the municipality would have access to it, but none of the other stakeholders would have access to it unless the owner gave them permission. So for owners of a property, there are complete property records that you would have access to in your own home, on your phone. And this would save valuable time, and it would help in terms of improving the efficiencies, because everybody would be looking at the same thing. If they were going to come to the municipality for a building permit, well, everybody would be looking at the same grading plan, the same site service report, and all the other things. It would be shared, so it would cut down on some of the lost time in that regard. So everybody wins with GRID. For a nominal increase in fees to the property owner and little change to the industry procedures, millions, if not billions, would be generated through GRID, in addition to the efficiencies. So we would be able to have more tax revenue. It would reduce risks in both the insurance and the banking industries. There'd be tighter regulatory control for municipalities, and for property owners, they would win the most in terms of being able to have complete records, be rewarded for the good stewardship of their property. It would reduce their financing and insurance costs. The property taxes would be, there'd be a fairer allocation of property taxes because assessments would be more accurate and they would align with the current state of properties. And buyers would be better informed about properties, and it would hold sellers more accountable. So we believe that we will become the standard and the solution. We will mitigate risk, improve efficiencies, and encourage better stewardship of properties. It'll be a dynamic, real-time registry. It's trusted and transparent, and it will foster accountability. So this is our team right now. Anthony Wisnowski was the former president of MPAC's business development. Paul Awesome has been a CTO for a number of different successful tech companies. Mike Amos is a very successful tech entrepreneur. We have been working in collaboration with the University of Ottawa, and we have a number of very reputable advisors. So where do we go from here, and why am I, presenting to you? First, I'd like to keep you informed with the work that we're doing, because I'm very excited about it. But also I'm asking the township if I would be able to, if the township would issue a letter of support for the concept, for the exploration. Right now, there's a number of different industry stakeholders that are doing exploratory work with blockchain. CMHC most notably just issued a paper on their work in mortgage securitization with blockchain. The TREB, which is the Toronto Real Estate Board, and TerraNet just announced that they're exploring the use of blockchain with a new MLS system. And I've been in conversations with the CEO of TerraNet, as well as Tim Hudak, who's of course the CEO of AREA and CMHC and a number of other partners. And so hoping to be able to get some traction for grid, but I think it really would help if my own hometown would, kind of stand with me on this one and support the work that we're doing, and perhaps even allow me to use the logo on the website as just a sign of support for the concept. It's not, we're not there yet. We're still doing consultation. We finished the proof of concept, but it's now at the point that we would like to explore it further and build the program. But it has to start with just getting out there and speaking to wonderful people like yourselves. And anyway, so that's what I'm doing. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, and I'll stop sharing my screen. There we go. But I was wondering if anybody has any questions or.
Okay, thank you, Irene, for your presentation. I do have a quick question. Who would be responsible to download all the documents? Is it each, like if the township, if a homeowner came in and applied for a permit, is it the homeowner's responsibility to download all documents, or where does that come from?
Yeah, so what it is it's meant to work with your systems. So a homeowner would still come in the same way they do. Now, I know that the province is moving towards having, let's say for the building permits, just a single building online building application portal. And so it would be working with that we have the ability that we can pull data from that. And so on our system, whether we're working with systems that you have and we're importing that data, everything is going to be going electronic. So whether it's part of, I'm assuming that the township, I know that there are townships out there that do not do everything electronically, but I'm assuming that, let's say within our township, that you do electronic saving of applications and building plans and things like that. So those PDFs would be uploaded. It would start with the township after you've decided that you approve it. It wouldn't start before, but once you're ready to approve, that would be uploaded. Then the homeowner the property owner that's applying for the permit would then look at what the township has uploaded. They would agree to it. And then that would create a successfully completed smart contract. And then that goes on the blockchain. So it's kind of like a dance, and it just depends, but it's going through every system. So it's meant to work with your systems. It's not meant to be burdensome. And where there's an opportunity that we can automate these processes, we will take that opportunity to automate them. I don't know if that answered the question, but it's. Yeah,
no, that's clear. Thank you, Irene. I have another question from Councillor McDonnell and then Councillor Lang.
Sure.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Irene, it's a very interesting concept to me. I know I've had issues in the past of either missing or incomplete records on properties I've either inquired on or owned. I think it's I guess some of the questions for myself would be, we do have a lot of paper records as of now. I'm assuming then, based on your last answer to Mayor Prevost's question, they could be easily uploaded into the system as well if we were to go down that road.
Absolutely, absolutely. And there is, so with our system, what we've considered is that what we call the genesis date. So what would likely happen is that there would be probably another year of exploring this and then developing a couple of workflows and then testing it. We would do what's called shadowing and run it in parallel to the existing systems just to work all the bugs out. But when it finally goes for implementation, we wouldn't try and recreate the past, because then that's not true to the blockchain, because we wouldn't have consensus for everything that's going up there. It would only be for documents and changes to properties as they happen as of that start date, that genesis date. We have looked to possibly NPAC for producing what's called the seed data. So in other words, the static information that the land registry already has, homeowner, historic property date, mortgages, purchase price, those kind of things. Those we will have, but only the new records going forward would be imported. There may be consideration, if there's enough demand, that to have historic information input, but it would be done, but that would be, I guess we aren't considering that right now, but if there was the demand, we would of course have a system that you could clearly see that this is historic information that hasn't gone through consensus and smart contracts. But right now it would just be for going forward.
Perfect. Thanks for your presentation. I look forward to hearing more from staff and council.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to Councillor Lang, and then we have Councillor Jaworski right after.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. Thanks, Irene, for the presentation, and it's great to see somebody local taking big strides to go places and develop something like this. I have a question, or this information, and depending on how much is in there, does the property owner have full control over who gets to see this information? And you know, I don't know how far this information is going to go. Give you some examples. Can a bank go on and look and see if the taxes are paid up at any time? You know, this sort of thing. Can neighboring property owners get onto the system and you know, get information? Where now, you know, if they go to the registry office, it's kind of limited what they can get, and it costs them a little bit of money to get it and a big pain in the butt. But I just kind of wonder, for the privacy end of it, you know, as a buyer, we want to know everything about a property, but as an owner, sometimes you don't want everybody knowing everything about it. So just where do you see that coming out?
Yeah, of course. Oh, that's an excellent question. Yeah, no, the privacy laws of the jurisdiction will be encoded into the system. So if under the current privacy laws, a bank shouldn't be able to have access to that, they will not have access to it within grid. The property owner will be able to see everything about their property. And if they choose to share that, they may. What I envisioned is that we would eventually have what would be called a grid report, so that would become a standard, you know, condition, you know, in an agreement of purchase and sale, that a buyer would say, this is conditional on satisfactory review of the grid report. And it would be at that point in time that the seller would, you know, print off something and show. You'd be able to, so issues of title, outstanding work orders, that kind of thing, it would be, everything would be current and up to date, because of course, having, you know, you've owned properties, you've bought and sold them, you never really know what the title's like until the title search has gone. And even then there's sometimes, you know, things that are missed, and that's why we have title insurance. So this is intended to reduce the risk. People would still be able to log on just as a user, and if they were really that curious, they could pay some money to get the same type of information that they could at the land registry about their neighbor, but they'd not be able to get any more. So this system would be operated as the land registry, so it wouldn't be, you know, the Ontario Land Registry would still make all the rules, and all of that would be implemented.
Thank you.
Did I get all the questions?
So.
Sorry, I don't.
I think so.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Jaworski.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. As Councillor Lang said, Irene, it's very exciting to see someone from South Glengarry work on something that is really, new technology, really. So that's really exciting. So kudos to you. I have a couple of questions. One question is, what would be the costs to the township to be part of GRID, or how is GRID remunerated, I suppose, by our participation? And my other question, well, I'll give you both of my questions. The other question is, assuming everything goes well, what do you reasonably imagine would be like, when would GRID be implemented? When would you see it actually going live?
Great. No, thank you very much for those questions. Yeah. So first, with the municipality, it would be based. So any of the fees for registering new information on the blockchain would be borne by the property owner, and this would be no different. So it's different because right now we do not register permit applications or applications of subdivision or anything like that. We don't go through the whole process through the land registry, so that would be new. But to the property owner, they're not used to being able to have that type of, I'll call it, control. So let's say I've done a subdivision before, and not knowing where things are is sometimes often more than not very, very frustrating, and not knowing how can you expedite the process, where is the bottleneck. This would give the property owner the ability to see, oh, okay, the only thing I'm missing is a clearance letter from Bell Canada. Well, I'll give the Bell Canada rep a call and get that clearance letter. So for it would be something along the lines of, let's say, $25 to register the building permit to the homeowner, then $15 for each interim inspection. But then at the end of the day, they have this wealth of information. They have the virtual filing cabinet. They have a system that runs more efficiently, hopefully that trickles back to them with reduced costs for mortgages, for insurance, property taxes being fairly allocated, and hopefully also a reduced provincial and federal tax rates, because now it also shines an eye on the underground economy, because if people know that there's this type of transparency, they will be more inclined to go and get a building permit when they should, because when they go to sell and the buyer says, did you get a building permit? Well, they know once they get access to the GRID report, they know the answer. Same thing with when they're trying to support a huge increase in valuation, they're going to want to say, oh, well, look at these home improvements we did. That's oftentimes where people will hide, cash. I'm also, started out as an accountant, and so I did auditing, and I still remember on net worth audits, that was the first place that CRA went, was to the insurance. They wanted to see what was on your insurance, because people tend to spend cash on things that are toys or houses or things like that, of that nature. This would all be transparent. So where we say, yes, it'll cost a nominal amount more for the homeowner, for the property owner, there should be significant gains that outweigh those costs. But to the township, it should not cost anything. And our hope actually is that we would be able to do some form of sharing. Now that's something that we're talking about now with the municipalities and with, through MPAC and everything else, because this will generate revenue. And so how is this revenue distributed? So that's something that we're exploring, but right now it should not cost the municipality anything. And Stephanie, I'm sorry, your other question was?
When you think this might be actually go live?
Yeah, so right now, I think because blockchain is still so new, we're probably looking at another, realistically, 18 to 24 months. But you know, it could be a little bit longer. It just depends upon, you know, the appetite, let's say, for a lack of a better word, of the government to push forward. I have been getting some really good feedback from, you know, MPPs. Our local MP is wonderful. He's been a great supporter and really good advocate, as has our MPP, Jim McDonnell, has been doing opening some great doors. So really appreciate the support that way. But the fact that CMHC, that was really exciting, that CMHC came out in December saying that they're exploring it. And it was really, I had met with them back in 2018, and it's the same team that's working on theirs that I had met with before. So it was fun to go back and talk about kind of the journey and what we've discovered. And so I'm hoping that we're going to be doing some collaboration. But it just takes, you know, it takes a little bit of traction because it's a new technology and people aren't familiar with it. But it really is an exciting new technology. So.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I have a question, and I'll go to Deputy Mayor Wharton. Irene, would the general public have access to the grid report, and does real estate agents have access to the grid report, and is there a fee to that?
Yeah, so the fee structure, again, you know, I was looking at Geo Warehouse, as you're familiar with, and the same type of a subscription we would be doing with that, you know, $260 a year for realtors, you know, appraisers would have access, and we'd have the same access that we have right now. We wouldn't be able to see any more, but it would be the property owner that would have that much more information. So when we, you know, if we go to list a house, we actually can trust the information. They actually have all the information, but we can rest confident. As you know, there is an element of risk and a lot of research that we do when we take a listing to make sure that we have accurate information, that we are conveying that to potential buyers, because it is a huge responsibility. So this would help, you know, with that. The average public would have the same access that they do to the current land registry, but they'd just be able to do it online. So they wouldn't have to physically go to the registry, but they would still have that very limited information. They'd be able to access limited information, and again, for a fee. So we aren't intending to disrupt any of the fee structures that are set in place. We're just saying that for TerraNet, there are, you know, there'll be some exponentially more fees that they can charge because they'll be registering a number of other things. But again, the benefits strongly outweigh the additional costs. So.
Yep. Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor Wharton.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Irene, I want to thank you for your presentation. Definitely is cutting edge technology. And I think, as you said in your presentation, it's going to offer a lot more transparency for buyers, for municipalities, and other stakeholders. And I would be in favor of, you know, having staff come back to us, and hopefully we could be able to, you know, give you that letter of support. I think it's cutting edge. I think it's wonderful that it's coming from our municipality, and I wish you the best with this endeavor.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Irene. I don't see any other questions coming from members of council. So thanks very much for your presentation. The information will be relayed back to our staff. Staff will come back with another report at their either next council meeting or one there shortly after. And hopefully we can support you with a letter of support shortly after that.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for your time. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Enjoy your evening.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move to number 7, new business, staff reports, mobile food premises. Ms. Brune, I believe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Tonight I'll be presenting the proposed mobile food premise for the Township of South Glengarry. As you are aware, you have a staff report in your hands, but I'm going to go straight to my PowerPoint once I remember to share my screen first. Can someone confirm you can see it?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So mobile food premise bylaw, the Township of South Glengarry's Community Services staff, which is no longer a name, I apologize, has shown interest, as well as council, for a revised bylaw. The proposed bylaw would replace the 2311 bylaw, currently called the chip stand bylaw. The Municipal Act does allow us to create, regulate, and govern these mobile food premises within our municipality. These are strategic goals based on council's decisions, and this is what I believe would agree with our strategic goals. So our alignment would be enhance economic growth and prosperity. We would use the value of innovation by creating this new bylaw. Officer efficiency would play into strengthening effectiveness and efficiency within our organization. Number 4 would be improve quality of life in our community, and the value of excellence, the continuing learning and promoting development. I'm going to move to the next slide. Oops. So a new definition. Current mobile food premise bylaw does have a little bit more restriction in it, seen as it defines specific elements, whereas this one would allow us to address what staff truly believe and what a mobile food premise really is. So a motorized vehicle or unit so constructed that it may be towed or drawn by a motor vehicle equipped for cartage and storage and preparation of food, stuffs, beverages, confections, and from which the aforesaid items are offered for sale directly to the public. Some of the main differences that are going to be between the current bylaw and the proposed bylaw would be the license cannot be transferred or assigned. And now we would like to see it have the possibility of being transferred. I added this in for the sole purpose of, let's say it's a father and son that start the mobile food premise together. The father's deciding to leave and give the mobile food premise to the son. That way there he can transfer the license over completely to his son or something of the sorts. But at least we would have the opportunity to be able to do it. Right now, regarding permitted zones, we have it strictly as commercial and industrial. I definitely believe we should add open space in, because that would allow mobile food premises and parks, and we would be able to govern them. The distance from eating establishments. Currently, 200 meters is one of the most, the furthest distance from another eating establishment, which would mean a restaurant. I would like to see that reduced to 100 meters, which is more in line with the best practices around our region. Distance from dwellings, our current bylaw is 90 meters. That is pretty significant. In speaking with the counties to ensure that everything follows through between everyone and we flow properly, we've agreed on a distance of 1.2 meters from non-residential properties and 3 meters from residential properties. The reason for the 3 meters is to allow a little more distance, especially if you're having a mobile food premise next to a house, a commercial building, a commercial lot next to a residential house. At least that way there, it's a little further distance. Distance from street allowances, currently it's 30 meters. So we're talking about from the street allowance, then you go back 30 meters. We would like to see that reduced to from property lines of 1.2 meters. However, because we're reducing that distance by so drastically, it would, to ensure safety and egress from properties, we would like to see side triangles enforced, as well as nothing within 1 meter of a sidewalk, which was also confirmed with the counties to ensure we were all flowing properly and that they would also permit it. Regarding hours of operations, currently we have 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. I would like to see this, and staff would also like to see this changed to 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. Monday to Saturday, as well as Sundays 8 a.m. to 11 p.m. That way there we're following in compliance with our nuisance bylaw. So mobile food premises, this would just clarify some of the reasonings as I had stated. So the 3.5 meters from an entrance to a dwelling, we would like, or not a dwelling, to a building. Keep that space clear for emergency services in case there needs to be enough evacuation. That way there are enough people have enough space to leave the building, or if an ambulance needs to come in for any reason, they would have enough space between that mobile food premise and the entrance to that building. Next would be the site triangle, or the distance from a driveway. If a mobile food premise is allowed to be up to 3 meters to the property line, if there's a driveway there, they have to be, or up to 1.2 meters, sorry. They need to keep that 3 meter distance to ensure that the person in the driveway can see and have a good sight from his driveway or her driveway. Using private properties, unless the operator of the truck personally owns that property, they would need to get permission from the property owners to ensure that they are in a commercial zone, industrial zone, or open space zone. It would start by determining one of those three, obtaining written permission from the landowner, and then they would provide that in the complete township application. This slide has a ton of information on it. It is everything that the township would require for the mobile food premise operator to submit a complete application. It appears to be a lot, but most of it is things that you have on you at all times anyway, such as premise ownership or driver's license. You'll need your liability insurance, and that's all indicated throughout the actual application form. It'll be clearly laid out, so that's just a check sheet that owners would go through. This would be an example of a site plan. We require the site plan to ensure that there is compliance with our mobile food premise bylaw. As indicated in here, the little truck would be the mobile food premise. They're in a commercial or industrial lot in this situation. They would have to indicate where the trash is located. That's specific to some events where the mobile food premise did not have garbage available. So the constituents or whoever was going and attending that mobile food premise was tossing their forks and knives on the ground, napkins, and it would just cause a nuisance to the environment. That way there, if the owners are responsible for the garbage and recycling to take it out once a day, that would ensure that there's no possibility of garbage deriving on other people's properties from this mobile food premise. The application system is as easy as 1, 2, 3, actually 4, because you complete your application, you have your site plan included, you pay the application fee, and then the last step would be to get an inspection from the municipality, the fire chief, or the fire department, and ensure that everything remains in compliance with our bylaws, and we would be able to issue that no problem. This would be a best practice comparison. So I have here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different municipalities. And throughout all of those, staff went through to ensure that we were choosing regulations that would best suit our municipality, however, are still in comparison to others. So special events, as you can see here, a lot of actually there was no steady comparison between everyone. So we remained with our 4 days. Food establishments, there was a huge variance in different regulations for it, and we went with 100 meters. The cost for the actual license, we remained with our 500. Permitted zones, some of those have their, as per their zoning bylaw and commercials, residential hamlets. A lot of them all followed through with all three that have been suggested to council this evening. Other agencies involved with the application, everyone has the same. The public health unit is required, as well as fire services. And then we have the insurance liability, which we remain with the 2 million. Why would the township need to do the work? So under the enforcement section of the bylaw, there's quite a bit of information there. That allows the township, under any circumstance, to be able to enforce the bylaw when necessary. Whether it's trash not being cleaned up, which we would always start with verbal education, and then if ever need to, we would go forward with an order. Parking, same thing. Is the mobile food premise parked on a sidewalk? Is it parked too close to a driveway? Is it preventing someone from exiting? We would be able to enforce it. Permitted locations. Are they located on their own private property that's zoned as residential? It's not permitted to operate there. In their application, we would see where they're permitted to operate and go based on that. If all else fails, the verbal fails, the orders fail, the township would be able to go in and ensure that the trash is removed, ensure that the mobile food premise is parked in the right location, and if not, move it ourselves or through a third party. This bylaw, it would allow for new regulations with more flexibility regarding a mobile food premise, does not require a complaint to address the non-conformance. That's the biggest one. If we see that a mobile food premise is operating in a non-permitted location, we can address it right away. Continues to ensure any permitted location will not adversely affect local restaurants and taxpayers. Also very important, we don't want to negatively affect anyone in the municipality by allowing these rules. Enforcement model is always the same. Conversation, education first, notice and order, and then we would move on to cost, fees, and fines. The proposed bylaw will allow for more opportunities for operators to pursue the chance to operate a mobile food premise within our community. I specifically indicate that because there has been situations in 2020 as well as 2019 in my experience where someone has come into the municipality to obtain a mobile food premise license and they weren't able to due to their location being so restricted with our regulations. We weren't able to allow them to operate, or they didn't qualify under the definition of mobile food premise. Is there any questions from council? I will exit the screen sharing. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I do have a couple of quick questions, and I'll go to council next. What was I thinking? Are they going to have a drawing in regards to where their truck or chip truck or whatever you want to call it will be established on the property before we give out a permit? Because I hate to go back after and say it's in the wrong area, you got to move it, or you're going to be fined or whatever the case may be. So is that something we're going to be requiring?
Precisely, through you, Mr. Mayor, it would be definitely required in the application. So before they even start to think about being able to be located somewhere, they would have to draw out that little diagram that I had indicated with all the information required in that checklist. Okay. And then we would ask them, are you planning on operating anywhere else? Because in this situation, they could have 3 locations being permitted to operate in. And then they would have to indicate those. And if they weren't in those locations in that identical area permitted, then they wouldn't be allowed to operate.
Okay, I just want to make sure that they do put in something prior, just so that we don't have to deal with it after the fact. But
for sure.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to Councillor McDonnell, then Councillor Lang, and I believe Deputy Mayor Wharton.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Brunette, for the report. So I think there's a lot of good in that report. I think it'd be nice to see a lot of these, some of these rules and regulations pulled back a little bit. I do have a few concerns. One was I'm not overly convinced on not requiring a complaint to handle a nonconformity. Sometimes I think if it's not bothering anybody, there's no sense bothering someone about it if no one's too disturbed. The other one that I was always wondering about for a special event. So I know you had mentioned private property, so maybe I'll get you to handle a few with this. We can't. So I'll give you an example. You're hosting a wedding on private property, say a backyard wedding, and you invite a food truck, and that's going to be your meal for the night, say, or it's your midnight snack. How does that work? Because to my understanding, you wouldn't be allowed to have that, or a one-night special event. We do require a permit. Maybe we should be exempting on that. I'd like to get your thoughts on that as well, if you could.
Yeah. So through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you, Councillor McDonnell. So I do understand completely. I had received an email earlier today with a question similar to that regarding the special events. I do believe if that is the interest of council, staff can definitely include an exemption that would state, so as long as permission is received from the municipality for a one-day event, such as a wedding of sorts, they would be permitted to have that chip stand located on their private property. As it stands, as you read, and as the current bylaw reads, it would only be permitted, I believe, the raisin race, the canoe race, the Williamstown Fair, and there's a couple of others on there, Canada Day, for example. But we can definitely include an exemption. If we wouldn't include one, it would just be a matter of the property owners writing to staff to come to council to ask permission to be exempt from that. However, we can completely avoid that situation by adding an exemption right off the bat.
Excellent. No, I'd like to see that. I'd like to see that exemption. I'm just thinking of a few events that would happen that there's no sense having these people get themselves into trouble. A day before, the day of.
In addition, I believe you had a secondary question to that was regarding complaint-based.
Complaint-based,
yeah. In that effect, the complaint-based, and I can have a policy written for this, it would be strictly due to the location of whether it's commercial, industrial, or open zone. Any other complaint would have to come through a complaint process, but for those three would be enforceable by the municipality driving around. Oh, why is he parked on the highway? That's not allowed. So time to move him, or the mobile food premise in general, or go and talk to them. Or if they're operating out their driveway on the weekends and someone happens to stumble upon it, things like that. That would be something where we could address proactively versus waiting for that complaint, because then anyone would be able to set up shop and the municipality wouldn't act on it.
Okay, no, I agree with that. I mean, as far as it goes, restaurants and everybody else has to conform when it comes to zoning. So I agree as much as that. But I mean, little complaints, I'd rather see the public complain before we go out and start.
Without a doubt. Yeah. If I could add and just ask a question back, Councillor, it would be regarding the private property events, special events. If council does agree that they would like to go forward with that exemption, it would be staff's recommendation to still require an application come in and go through the process. Maybe a different fee, that would be up to council, but still so that we can see to ensure that, you know, fire is still being followed, fire regulations, public health unit regulations, and so on and so forth.
I'd be interested in something like that, so long as it's based on what the event is. I mean, as far as I would understand, I mean, anybody who's having a wedding or something like that, I'm sure is taking proper precautions with their own insurance, and that's why they're paying those bills. They don't need us checking up on them as far as that goes. That would just be my suggestion to staff in regards to that.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Martinell. I'll go to Councillor Lang.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. Thank you, Ms. Brunet, for the report. Excited to see it. I think we've been known as a municipality that was basically against food trucks and discouraging them strongly. And I don't think in this day and age it was the right thing to do. I think we're on the right track here. I hope that we can get this thing moving forward. Everybody's going to support. I suspect we will. I've often wondered why nobody was able to do something Thursday nights in Williamstown for soccer. You know, just 600 people come into the village right around supper time, usually running late, not having had time to eat. It would be a great place if somebody was in that type of business to put something up Thursday nights. So very happy to see it. I think you're on the right track. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Lang, Deputy Mayor Wharton, then Councillor Jaworski.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much, Veronica, for this report. I'm quite pleased with most of it. I think it's good that we're modernizing because it certainly was out of date in my opinion. On to what Councillor McDonnell said, I would like to see an exemption for a one-day event on a private property, and I don't want to see a fee. I think that you're busy enough. You know, if someone's having a party on their own property, it's up to them to do due diligence. And I feel like if you, and any owner of a chip truck has TSSA requirements to follow, they have Highway Traffic Act, you know, that vehicle has to be safe, they pay insurance. I don't feel we need to be a nanny for another thing. And common sense goes a long way. Guidelines, maybe, you know, we could have pamphlets. If you were considering having this because it's an exemption, we could offer, you could spend, you know, a couple hours making a guideline and then it's done. We don't have to go there anymore. And the other issue, I'm not crazy on, you know, enforcement without complaint. I feel like if we're issuing a license, the do's and the don'ts are like clearly defined, so you'll explain to them where they can go. And I feel like I don't like the idea that, you know, if you're at home on a Saturday and you see something that I don't like the idea that, you know, I just don't like that idea. I'm not there yet. We're not a large enough municipality that we require by law to be knocking on doors and stuff. Obviously, there's certain levels of that, you know, that, you know, things have to be dealt with sometimes. But I'm not in favor of automatic enforcement. So thank you. Very comprehensive report. I read it and I was very impressed. So thank you very much.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Deputy Mayor, for the comments. And for the constructive criticism, I do fully agree with the aim that council seems to want to go with, and we can definitely revise that to include an exception in there for the private properties. As long, I believe I have 2 on board right now for that, so I'd like just to get a little bit more feelers to ensure that before I move forward. That's not a problem. We can definitely alter that to the effect of the proactive complaints. I understand. I would be a little nervous for like the highway traffic stuff. Now, understandably, the police would still be able to react to that if they're parked on the side of the road or blocking traffic and keeping operating off of it. However, I do believe, although as soon as council says they want it, that's not a problem. But if there were, for certain issues as stated, a proactive approach, and it would just be a conversation, just reminding them, you can't operate in this location. If you want to, please include it on your application or move on that way. It wouldn't be automatic to, we saw you working here this weekend, please ensure, and here's an order in the mail kind of deal. But that's, I believe I have 2 on board for this, and we can continue moving forward and altering that in the bylaw as well.
Okay, thank you. You'll probably get a third before it's done, but I'm going to go to Councillor Jaworski next.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much, Veronique, for the staff report. So since it's been brought up and you're looking for more comment on the events on private property sort of exemption, I kind of look at that very much as when folks are having a wedding and they hire a caterer. Like, there's there's certain assumptions that are made that the business that's serving you is, they've taken care of all those items that you've, listed in terms of insurance, et cetera. And I assume also that the health unit also is involved somehow with food trucks. So I don't think that we need to do a lot of double checking on those. I mean, I think Deputy Mayor Wharton's suggestion of, if you're using a food truck, here's the things that you should be aware of or should check, or but that getting involved in enforcement of one-day events, I don't think it's worth the time of staff to get involved in that. With regards to other special events, though, one thing I wanted to get a little bit more clarification on is, we list like Raisin River Race, Williamstown Fair, but how, just walk me through how it would work, for example, like when there's horse shows during the summer on the fairgrounds. Let's say if someone wanted to bring in a food truck for one of those events, how would that process work? Because that would be, I guess, just walk me through the process. I'm not sure if I follow what steps they'd have to take.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Jaworski, fantastic question. Thank you very much. They would have to go through the normal mobile food premise application process. If they're planning on coming in for that event that weekend, they would have to come in, provide the plan and all the information and where they're located. And at that point, they would be able to receive a license as long as the application fee is paid. Now, if it is council's direction, we can also include that saying, including in special events, alter the definition somehow to include events having certain population or lasting 4 days and ended at that, and not have that list, and just saying any event lasting 4 days, a maximum of 4 days, can operate that weekend there. So as long as they meet all their own requirements. Right. And we would leave it at that. Now, and I believe then if that's the situation, our mobile food premise would govern strictly businesses that want to operate in South Glengarry throughout the season or the year or things like that, not for these events, which I see a few head nods. So I think that's the direction we're going to go with. But if that answers your question, if you have any follow-ups, let me know. Yeah,
no, yeah, certainly. I think for those that are setting up kind of quote unquote temporarily, I think I'd like to try and make it as easy as possible, because like the folks who operate the fairgrounds, they want to have events during the summer and they want to make it easy for people to take advantage of those sites throughout the year, not just on fair weekend. So I think I'd like to try make that as streamlined and as easy as possible. So if there is a way of responsibly opening up that special event definition, I would definitely be in favor of that.
Perfect. Thank you, Councillor.
Okay, thank you. I believe, Ms. Bernay, you understand in regards to what changes council is asking for when you bring back for the third reading. Is that fair? Okay, Councillor McDonnell.
Another question, yeah.
Just one question I didn't get to earlier, and I thought maybe somebody pick it up, but can you give me another little bit more information on your definition of a food truck? I know I'm going back and thought too, there's another, there's one maybe a well-known chip truck in the village of Lancaster, maybe that comes to mind, as well as one that used to be in Martintown. It was basically a temporary structure more or less, but you know, you could make it mobile by strapping it onto a trailer, but it wasn't necessarily mobile itself. And obviously the one in the village, I don't know that the bus would start, but I'm just thinking in terms of that and maybe permanent structures that were built around them, or do we have a grandfathering process for that? So you can shed some light for me there.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor, thank you for the question. So the new definition is going to better aid staff in addressing anything that can be carted, so a trailer and a truck itself. Now, if the mobile food premise is stationary, and I use that term lightly because if it falls under the definition of a food establishment for the Eastern Ontario Health Unit, then that's what it is. However, if it is like if there is no hardwired connections, there's no plumbing through the building into the ground for the municipal waters and all that stuff, then it all falls back to our new definition would 100% encompass that building or that mobile food premise. However, if we're talking about, you know, a 10 by 10 shack placed on a property and someone's bringing in fruits and vegetables on the weekend, that wouldn't fall under it. I hope that answers.
Yeah, no, I just, you know, I just remember a few entrepreneurial high school students that did something in Martintown on a commercial property, and you hate to see that kind of spirit maybe get crushed with a simple bylaw issue. So just hate to see something like that happen. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Burnett. Again, we'll expect those changes, I guess, when you come back with the third reading. So we'll wait for that in respect to that. So I do have a motion moved by Martin Lang, second by Sam McDonnell. Be resolved that staff report 32-2021 be received and that bylaw 16-2021, being a bylaw to regulate and govern mobile food premises in the township of South Glengarry, be read a first and second time this first day of March 2021. There's no other questions or comments. All in favor of the motion? Motion's carried. Thank you, Ms. Burnett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. Have a great evening.
Okay, we'll move to number 2, Employment District Lands, South Lancaster. Mrs. Haley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So you may recall in the fall of 2020, Council received a request from a taxpayer to consider the removal of the employment district designations for their lands located in South Lancaster. The reason for this request is because the current designation of employment district does not permit any residential use at all. And the developer is looking at the possibility of proposing a mixed use residential and commercial development. That would require an official plan amendment site specific to that property. In reviewing the South Lancaster designations, almost all of our commercial properties located in South Lancaster fall within the employment district designation. And so this is something that I've always been concerned about over the years and would prefer to see it in a commercial district just to allow for more flexibility, both in terms of residential uses, as well as making sure that our proposed uses are compatible. So for example, in the employment district, it really is primarily meant to be an industrial manufacturing type use that employs individuals, as opposed to a commercial type use that would provide a service to our residential area. So you may recall in December, at our December 21st council meeting, we discussed this item, and council supported my idea of looking at the entire South Lancaster area to change the designation. We proceeded in retaining the firm Hempson Consulting Limited. The purpose of retaining this firm is because they had worked for the United Counties of SD&G previously to do employment studies and demographic studies for our official plan. So it just made sense to go back to them to do an addendum or really a re-review of our area to see if they could support the designation change. It's important to have a report prepared like Hempson did in order to be able to meet the requirements of the provincial policy statement as I've outlined in the staff report. Also, we're very fortunate that the 2020 provincial policy statement was changed by the province that provided more flexibility in the employment district zones that would allow us to consider changing these districts or converting these districts without doing a whole county-wide study. We're now able to do a study that is more localized. So this report that's before you this evening focuses on the South Lancaster area. We attached the report that's prepared by Hempson to my staff report. And the good thing about the report completed by Hempson is it will provide the basis that will support the request for an official plan amendment. And when you proceed in applying for an official plan amendment, you need to be able to prove that your proposed amendment conforms to the provincial policy statement. And in this case, that report does exactly that. And my recommendation before you this evening is to receive the report and direct administration to proceed with an official plan amendment to redesignate the employment district lands to commercial district in the South Lancaster area. If I have a support from council this evening, what my next steps would be are to reach out to the business owners in the community that are affected. I feel it's important to deal with them directly to explain to them what the differences are going to be to their property between the employment district designations versus the commercial district designation. I also want to reach out to them before they receive a notice in the mail. Our formal notices tend to be written in a language that are often not really easily understood. So having the conversations with them in advance of the notices being sent will help them understand what we're considering and what the positive impacts will be to their space and their future development in some cases where we're dealing with vacant land. So, and then following that consultation with the property owners, we would then proceed in preparing an official plan amendment application that would then be filed with the United Counties. And the United Counties would then accept the application, review it, refer it back to the municipality to hold the public meeting. So if there's any questions regarding my staff report or the report prepared by Hempson, I'll do my best to answer your questions. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Haley. I will go to Councillor McDonnell.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Ms. Haley, thanks for the report. I'm really happy to see this come back in good time. My only question was just to clarify that if we do convert all these lands to commercial, that they could potentially do multi-residential buildings on them, and that would be a permitted use, or it would be a quick zoning amendment away.
Yeah, so to clarify through you, Mr. Mayor, currently, as I mentioned, there's no residential uses that are permitted at all. In the commercial use, if they proceed to the commercial use, they can then apply for a site-specific zoning amendment that would match what they're proposing to do at that time.
So I guess it would, sorry, you did kind of cut out in there. It would be possible to go that route. Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, sorry about that. It would definitely be possible for them to apply for the site-specific zoning amendment. One thing that I want to point out again, and I had mentioned, and maybe I mentioned it very quickly, is as much as a commercial or a residential use would be permitted, they're not permitted to be standalone. So it's not like we're going to turn our main street in South Lancaster as houses. It would allow for a perfect example of what the developer is proposing, to have possibly a few story apartments with commercial on the main floor. And that's the purpose of the official plan, is to make sure we don't lose our commercial districts or our commercial downtown cores in our community spaces.
Okay, so you could potentially, for example, do a small scale, say cotton mills, like they've done in Cornwall, where there's residential attached to large commercial. Okay, perfect.
Yes, perfect example.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions from members of council? Councillor Jaworski.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much, Ms. Haley, for the staff report. Like Councillor McDonnell said, it's very nice to see this come back so quickly, and also that the results are very positive And I certainly support the concept here of being able to allow uses that are much more in keeping with, the surrounding areas in question. So I look forward to hearing what you say, how the property owners who currently are there, if what kind of feedback that they might have. My one question I do have, and it's on the topic of what kind of zoning applications might have to be done later on by a property owner. So if the OPA is approved and making these changes, from employment district to just commercial district, what can they do? What would they then be able to do without any zoning amendment? Like what could they just do in a very, straightforward fashion?
Okay, so if you don't mind, I'll use the jewelry store and the Aberdeen gift store as an example. So in that location, they're currently zoned highway commercial. They're permitted a variety of commercial uses in that location. And there's an adjacent parcel that's to the south that's vacant. And that parcel is also zoned highway commercial. And when in the highway commercial zone, you're also permitted to have a residential use as an accessory use in the upper floor, the rear floor of the zone. So I don't anticipate any zoning changes in that location. And so that's one example. If I go to where Rob McIntosh is located, we've often talked about over the years how it would be nice to have an inn in the community or a motel. Well, currently in the employment district zone, that's not permitted at all because you cannot have any type of residential use where, let's say if there was the ability to have an inn on the Rob McIntosh site, well, then you would look at that zoning to see, does that zoning fit the needs of the inn? And it may trigger a zoning change. And then using the site that the developer came forward to council with in the fall, because it's currently zoned highway commercial and they want multi-residential units as opposed to just one unit that would be located at the rear or above the structure. In this case, it would trigger the zoning change to accommodate the proposed multi-units that they're looking for. I don't foresee very many zoning amendments having to be applied for only because of how flexible our commercial zone is in the zoning bylaw. I think it's only going to be for unique developments like the one that we received the request for.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Jaworski. Is there any other questions or comments from members of council? Not seeing none. I have a motion moved by Stephanie Jaworski, second by Martin Lang. Be resolved that staff report 33-2021 be received and that the council of the township of South Glengarry receives the proposed conversion of employment lands report prepared by Hemson Consulting Limited and directs administration to proceed with an official plan amendment to redesignate the employment district lands to commercial district in the South Lancaster area. Sorry, any other comments or questions? Not seeing none. All in favor of the motion? Motion's carried. Thank you, Mrs. Haley. Okay, we'll move to number 3. It's the Benjamin zoning bylaw amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this property is located in part of Lot 24, Concession 9 in the former township of Lancaster. The purpose of this application is a result of a surplus dwelling severance application that was previously approved that resulted in the retained lands of 13.35 hectares in size. When we have a parcel of property that's undersized, we require a zoning amendment to reduce the minimum lot area, as well as to prohibit residential construction as per the provincial policy statement. So you may recall that we had this public meeting in January of this year. Unfortunately, I just didn't have the time in February to get this staff report on the agenda, so I do apologize. However, even though I didn't get it done in February, we're still within the timelines of the Planning Act, as a decision will be made on day 73 within the 90-day time frame. I know we typically try and do decisions within about 45 to 60 days, but sometimes it just depends on the workload or what's happening. And the applicant is aware of this as well. And other than that, I have nothing else to add to this application. It's a straightforward report and request.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. Any comments or questions from members of council? As Mrs. Haley said, it's pretty straightforward. So I do have a motion moved by Lyle Wharton, second by Sam McDonnell. Be resolved that staff report 34-2021 be received in bylaw number 17-2021, being a bylaw to amend bylaw 38-09, the comprehensive zoning bylaw for the Township of South Glengarry for the property legally described as part of Lot 24, Concession 9 in the geographic Township of Lancaster, now in the Township of South Glengarry, the County of Glengarry, be rezoned from agricultural AG to natural hazard to agricultural / exception 28 AG-28 and natural hazard to reduce the minimum lot area from 20 hectares to 13.35 hectares and to prohibit residential construction. Be read a first, second, third time, passed, signed, and sealed in open council this first day of March 2021. And the Council of the Township of South Glengarry confirms that no public comments were received on this application. Therefore, there was no effect of the decision. All in favor of the motion? The motion's carried. Thank you, Mrs. Haley. And number 4 is the Tayo Town Heights Development Agreement for drainage purposes.
Again, thank you, Mr. Mayor. At our last council meeting, I brought to council a staff report recommending the Tayo Town Heights subdivision to be approved, as well as to seek direction from council to clear all the conditions as all of the required work was completed. The reason for this staff report before you this evening is to deal with the drainage for the property. Usually the drainage for the lots that are being created in a plan of subdivision are contained entirely within the subdivision. Subdivisions tend to be much larger. They tend to have proposed municipal roads or streets with ditches, a stormwater management pond, etc. In this application, it was unique because they proposed to create 5 building lots fronting on an existing road with no other infrastructure being required to be constructed. For that reason, when the engineering firm designed the grading and drainage plan for the subdivision, they established that the properties would drain to the south using a Hickenbottom drain that will eventually then drain to the open space or field to the south that is also currently owned by the developer. When we have drainage that occurs outside of the subdivision boundaries, it's important that we have a development agreement in place to make sure that not only the current owner, but any future property owners are aware of the requirements of the drainage, how the system works, and that they're responsible or required to permit the drainage to still go onto that property. That property is currently being farmed. It's intended to be farmed while this current owner owns it. However, that could change in the future if the ownership changes hands. You'll see in the development agreement that's been provided to you that it addresses the requirements of that property, how it's going to be registered on title, as well as the inclusion of the plan so that it's clear why the drainage needs to go to this parcel of property. So we don't see this too often in South Glengarry. You may recall we did a similar approach for Sapphire Estates Phase 5, where the stormwater management pond was located outside of the subdivision simply because the rules had changed while the subdivision had originally been designed compared to when it was approved. And so we handled it by a development agreement such as this. So as I mentioned, it's not common in South Glengarry, but definitely not uncommon for these types of processes. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments from members of council? Not seeing none. I do have a motion moved by Martin Lang, second by Lyle Wharton. Be resolved that staff report 35-2021 be received and that bylaw 18-2021 being a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to enter into a development agreement between the Township of South Glengarry and David Rotherell Grant for the purpose of the drainage for the property legally described as parts of lot 3739, registered plan number 101 in the geographic Township of Schlumberg, Township of South Glengarry, the County of Glengarry, be read a first, second, and third time, passed, signed, and sealed in open council this first day of March 2021. All in favor of the motion? Motion's carried. Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Haley. And number 5 is the Municipal Modernization Program application. Mrs. Compo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. Good evening, Council. You may recall in 2019, the municipality received some funding from the province through the Municipal Modernization Program. The province has now come out with a second intake for this program under 2 streams. They have a review stream and an implementation stream. So one of the priorities for the Corporate Services Department for the foreseeable future is going to be the modernization and digitization of our records and modernizing our records management practices. So that project is something that is very much one of the priorities identified in this new intake for the Municipal Modernization Program. So administration has been preparing a submission under the review stream, which will result in, if we're successful in obtaining the funding, we can retain a consultant to come in and do a current assessment of our records management practices. And they will also be able to provide recommendations for moving forward with the digitization of those records. What's nice about this funding stream is that we could be eligible for full funding for the project, or they may give partial funding, but regardless, if we do receive partial funding, we have already budgeted for this type of project for the year. So if we are successful in obtaining the funding, it would just be a bonus. Yeah, this is a project that we are committed to moving forward with, regardless of if we get the funding or not. A council resolution is not required to submit the application, but it certainly strengthens it. So tonight we have this report before you, looking for your support in proceeding with this application.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Campo. Any questions or comments? Councillor Jaworski, then Deputy Mayor Wharton.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Campo. Certainly I understand that it's, we have some opportunities to make our record keeping more efficient and more digital. One question I had with regards to this is, with the third party, this assessment that we would receive, is everything recommendations, or is there anything that comes out of this that is, quote unquote, binding, or things that must be actioned, or is it all discretionary?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the only requirement that we have, if we're successful, is that the consultant must provide us with a report that we must make available to the public. Whether or not we implement those suggestions is not mandatory. We are just required to share whatever the results of that report are publicly on our website.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor Wharton.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much, Kelly, for this report. I think it's the way of the future. I mean, our presentation that we received earlier tonight from Irene Cameron, everything is going in a more digitized, modern approach. So fully support this, and hopefully we can get some funds to see where we can improve. Thank you.
Absolutely. And if I might add on that a little bit, we are applying under the review stream. Initially, we were looking at the implementation stream, but this is one of those cases where, they were looking for a supporting evidence. So because we don't already have a current state assessment of our records, we weren't able to apply under the implementation stream. So by going through this process, having this third-party review, we then have that report in place so that if they come out with, say, a third intake for implementation, we now have the evidence to back up an application as to why we need to move forward with that.
Can I have a subsequent, Mr. Mayor?
Yep, go ahead.
Great, thanks. Kelly, so if we don't get this funding, like, what's the cost of this report? Because I mean, I think it's something that we should be looking into regardless of funding. What is the cost? Do you know what the cost is of the assessment or whatever?
Yeah, for sure. So through you, Mr. Mayor, I did have some discussions with consultants just to get an idea of what the cost would be, as that's something that needs to be included in the application. And based on that conversation with the individual I spoke to, she commented that the price can vary depending on how detailed you want to get. The lowball figure was about 25,000, but she said it could go as high as 50, depending on how detailed and how much you want to get into it. For a very basic report and basic overview, you're looking at a minimum of about 25,000. But if you really, we of course are going to apply for the maximum to get the most quality report that we can. So yeah, it can vary, but that was kind of the figures that I received from the consultant. And I see Mr. Mills popping in here, so I don't know if he wants to add to that.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Mills.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much, Mrs. Compo, for stepping in here to advocate for modernization. So one of the things that I just want to bring to council's attention that came about when we were looking at the grant application was the increasing requirement for reports or third-party consultant reports to be done when we're looking for grants. So by not having a report done already on modernization, we couldn't have applied for the stream that would have given us an opportunity to implement right away. So I just want to put that out there that while at times we may face criticism for spending a few dollars on getting some reports done, by having the reports done, in this case, we could have applied for significantly more funding.
Yep. Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor Wharton.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. So if we're not successful, I would encourage, I would like to see it come back and maybe see if we have a way of proceeding with this. I think, like CAO Tim just said, we're going to need these type of reports going forward. So let's hope we get the approval, but come back and ask if you didn't get it, please.
We'll keep you posted.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Not seeing none. I have a motion moved by Sam McDonnell, second by Stephanie Jaworski. Be resolved that the Council of the Township of South Glengarry hereby supports the submission of an application to the Municipal Modernization Program review stream for proposed records management current state assessment project. All in favor of the motion? Motion's carried. Thank you, Mrs. Compo.
Thank you.
And under other business, we have the Municipal Reserve Structure and Policy. Not sure who has that one. Oh, Mr. McDonald.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Bringing this one forth just as an information package because I don't want to do work if you don't want me to change things or aren't interested in seeing what a change would look like. This isn't an obligation that I will change it, but I'm presenting to you perhaps changing our reserves to be a little bit more asset-based as I move further into asset management planning. As you see on page 113, the example shows the fire reserve, the roads equipment reserve, the roads building reserves, and then an administrative building reserve. That is the way our current setup is. I think it would be advantageous. All these numbers are fictitious, by the way, not fictitious. I think I wrote that wrong. So it's fictitious, not fictitious, as per the report, to have fleet reserve, building reserve, and technology reserve. That way, when we have conversation, it isn't just fire has room for a fleet item. It's fire and roads have room for one fleet. Both are required. It makes us have priorities, which is a big sticking point in an asset management plan as we deliver, or as we deliberate and work further on that. So I'm looking for your permission to show you what the difference could be, but not commit to the difference if you're interested in that. If not, then I won't bother my time or your time.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. It's always interesting and to see different ways of doing things, but how much time do you anticipate spending on coming up with your new thoughts, I guess?
2 hours, probably near June.
Okay. Any comments or questions from members of council? Deputy Mayor Wharton.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Lachlan, thanks for this report. I read over it and I just, for the fleet reserve, I kind of like the idea of having the fire as a separate item and the roads as a separate item. I kind of, I don't know, I find it's easier to see what we have, and then when it comes to capital time, you know, we have that in the fire. But I would definitely like to see what you have to see on a more in-depth and with actual figures, so we can kind of put that to council and see if it's better.
Go ahead.
If I may further, Mr. Mayor. I like that idea too. I just wanted to present it that at one point, like to simplify the process, the reason I suggested perhaps going this far was once asset management planning is, we'll see the vehicles and we'll know how much we're contributing to a reserve for the fleet for each fire and roads. But I can certainly set it up for fire and roads to be separate or together, but I can come back with both of those examples. It wouldn't take me much longer. So no, that's good. Good perspective.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Lang and then Councillor Jaworski.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. Thank you, Mr. McDonald, for the report. I'd like to see what you come up with, especially for a couple hours work. I think it's all taxpayers' money, and you know, I know at the moment the fire fleet is in need of upgrade just because of provincial regulations and the years we're allowed to keep trucks. But we also know that we have some township trucks. So I think it's all taxpayers' money. It would be nice to see. You'd hate to see money sitting in reserve for one that didn't need any vehicles and we're not using it, you know, to upgrade vehicles that do need to be upgraded. So I think we have to keep an open mind as far as across the board. But like Mr. Wharton had said, you know, if it could still, you know, it could kind of be earmarked, but we think we need to think a little bit outside that and be able to shuffle stuff around according to where it's needed. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Jaworski.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. McDonald, for bringing this to our attention. Certainly, like Councillor Lang said, I'd be interested in your thoughts, you know, considering it doesn't sound like a very, you know, large task. Just general comments. I think definitely our reserves should line up with how we do asset management. You know, our list of reserves is all the different categories is almost a page long. And I think sometimes we're slicing and dicing it, for lack of a better word, in too fine a way. And I think sometimes it leads to that silo mentality where, you know, different departments are not, you know, we're not working together as much as we can, whereas, you know, this is my funds and those are your funds, where it is really all the taxpayers' funds. So I think, you know, or looking at how we can organize it so that it's more efficient and that also it's more clear as well for our residents as well when they want to understand where the money is held. I think that's also important, that the categories also make sense from a layman's perspective as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So that's enough information, Mr. McDonald, to bring back a report sometime in June, I guess. Okay, thank you. So under other business was the resolution in regards to 7B-2 in respect to vaccine. I asked Mrs. Campo to add this to the agenda for this evening. I've been receiving, I guess maybe as the mayor and warden, I've been receiving calls probably across the counties, or I know across the counties, in regards to wondering why a country like Canada is not receiving our vaccines as fast as other countries in the world. Obviously, I don't have answers for them in respect of why we're not receiving them. But I do have a motion on the table this evening to asking the province to do whatever they can to either push the federal government or to take it upon themselves to get the vaccine out quicker to our residents or the people that live in Ontario. As Councillor Jaworski had a conversation with me earlier on the phone, the province has approximately 200,000 vaccines in coolers throughout somewhere in the province. We need them put in arms, not in coolers. So I'm not sure why they're holding off in respect to that, but we need to pressure them to either get these 200,000 out and to try and get as many more vaccines as we possibly can to get our Ontarians vaccinated as quickly as we possibly can, so we can get some back to some type of a normal life sooner than later. I don't think waiting till September is fair to ask Ontarians or even the residents across the country. Other countries are either finished or just about completed in regards to being vaccinated, and I'm not sure why Canada is so far behind, but I think we need to pressure them to try and get as much vaccines as we possibly can. Councillor McDonnell, you had a comment or a question?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, I'd second the motion just based on Manitoba has already gone ahead with this and started to look at procuring their own vaccinations as well. And every day we're in a lockdown or we're shut down, we're killing another business. So I agree we need to get vaccines in arms as quick as possible and get the province back and get the world back to normal. So I'd gladly second that motion.
Okay, thank you. I asked for the motion to come forward, but unfortunately I can't move the motion, so I need somebody to move it. So Deputy Mayor Wharton will move it and Councillor McDonnell will second it. So I'll read the motion. Just give me a second. So it's a little long, but I have a motion moved by Lyle Wharton, second by Sam McDonnell. Whereas COVID-19, a disease caused by 2019 novel coronavirus, has resulted in the deaths of almost 7,000 Ontarians. And whereas Canada currently lags behind dozens of nations in terms of the proportion of the population that has received doses of COVID-19 vaccines. And whereas the federal government has moved too slowly and is failing to foster domestic vaccine production capacity. And whereas the number of administered vaccines in Ontario is not keeping pace with the number of doses that have been received by the provincial government. And whereas the provincial COVID-19 vaccine booking system is not yet operational. Now therefore it be resolved that the Council of the Township of South Glengarry urges Premier Doug Ford and the province of Ontario to procure approved COVID-19 vaccines to be distributed to the residents of the province of Ontario and increase the province vaccination rate to keep pace with the doses that have been received and accelerate the launch of its COVID-19 vaccine booking systems. And furthermore, that this resolution be forwarded to Premier Doug Ford, MPP Jim McDonnell, the Honourable Christine Elliott, Minister of Health, and the Honourable Minister of Finance and all other municipalities. Is there any other questions or comments? Not seeing none. You heard the motion. All in favor of the motion? Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Council, for supporting it. And we'll get that off to the other municipalities and to the province. Okay, for committee reports and information purposes only, I have a motion moved by Sam McDonnell, second by Stephanie Jaworski. Be resolved that the Council of the Township of South Glengarry accepts the items presented on the agenda as committee reports for information purposes only. All in favor of the motion? Motion's carried. And we'll go to unfinished business. Okay, I'll ask Mr. Mills to take on in regards to the corporate services, docks on township property.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, through you. As noted in your agenda tonight, sales are complete for all but two. There is an option for the parkland to the west. So it's the very west. It's the piece of land that's in front of what would be the old stint. It's now Esso. There's also a dock located there. There'll be a staff report coming in the very near future for consideration there. And consideration for the public dock to be there as well. There's a lot of activity in the area. We have the land that's been sold to the east of the La Framboise apartment building, and also with Glen Walter Park there as well, and you know the potential for development. So we'll be bringing a staff report back soon about that area.
Okay, thank you. And municipal servicing from the city of Cornwall.
We got 2 responses from letters to business owners. We'll need to convene an advisory committee meeting in the near future. Just for information, we've been doing asking around to a few municipalities about grants versus loans. There does not seem to be a lot of appetite recently, federally or provincially, for grants. One municipality has actually hired a company to advocate for them at the provincial and the federal level. That's, I suppose, for consideration in the future. Also in the near future, we're going to bring a staff report on Infrastructure Ontario loans, and that is an option to consider.
Okay, thank you. And I agree with you. I think that's the only option we're going to have just after the discussions we've had with the province over the last several months. We'll move to finance services, water rates, water bill design.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we jumped one there.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. The LED streetlights for Glen Walter. My apologies.
Yeah, so extremely, it was noted in the last council meeting, but extremely positive meeting with Cornwall Electric staff about the LED lights and our options with General Manager McDonald. We only have one General Manager McDonald now, so it's not as confusing. And our Director of Roads, Chris LeBlanc. So 3 options to consider. We'll discuss those with council in the very near future about the significant savings this can bring to the municipality. I know it's been a little bit contentious about how it has taken a while with COVID and other things, but we're extremely optimistic as staff we can stick a fork in this one in the very near future, and it'll be positive, but also environmentally friendly and result in cash savings for the municipality.
Okay, thank you. And now to finance services, water rates and water bill design, Mr. McDonald.
I will be returning next meeting with the water rate questions hopefully answered. If not, then I can return again after that. And then the water bill design is awaiting a response from Vadim. So sent them what we wanted, follow up once, I'll follow up again. But we'll continue to work on that, because now that we have an image that's adequate, we can ask them specifically for it. And I've also re-asked local municipalities if we are successful with this bill, if they're willing to help split the cost. So.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McDonald. And there's nothing else on unfinished business at this point. So I have a motion moved by Martin Lang, second by Sam McDonnell. Be resolved that the Council of the Township of South Glengarry convene to close session at 8:56 p.m. to discuss the following items under Section 239 of the Municipal Act, SO 2001. A meeting or part of a meeting may be closed to the public if the subject matter being considered is personal matters about identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees. Verbal update, and there's a memo and a proposed or pending acquisition of disposition of land by the municipality or local board, disposition of land and labor relations of an employee negotiations, a verbal update, and a position plan procedure criteria of instructions to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of the municipality, contract negotiations. You heard the motion. All in favor of the motion? Motion's carried. Thank you. So we will go directly into